Robin is one of the most iconic characters in comic book history, and he almost never existed. The guy who took credit for Batman didn't even want a sidekick. So today, I'm breaking down the entire history of Robin. Every version, every controversy, every identity crisis. Starting with a debut that was either genius marketing or peak delusion. The creation, 1940. In April 1940, Detective Comics number 38 hit shelves and introduced the world to Robin. The issue literally called him the sensational character find of 1940, which is either brilliant marketing or the most confident thing ever printed in a children's comic. Probably both, but here's the thing. Bob Kane didn't want Robin to exist at all. Bill Finger and Jerry Robinson had to actively lobby for the sidekick concept, arguing that Batman was too dark, too isolated, and that a younger character would pull in kid readers and give Batman someone to actually talk to instead of just brooding in silence. Kane eventually caved. Sales jumped dramatically. Jerry Robinson designed the costume using N.C. Wyeth's illustrations of Robin. That's how you end up with a kid fighting crime in a bold, colorful outfit that became one of the most recognizable costumes in comics. The name was a nod to Robin Hood too, not the bird. Dick Grayson was built as a deliberate mirror to Bruce Wayne. Orphaned acrobat, parents murdered, loss as the entire foundation. But he was framed as a partner, not a prop, but Robin's creation was just the spark. What happened next turned him into a genuine phenomenon, and the Golden Age made sure everyone in America knew his name. Golden Age. Here's the thing about Robin that nobody appreciates enough. He didn't just help Batman, he overtook him. When Robin debuted in Detective Comics number 38, circulation spiked 50% almost overnight, and it stayed elevated through the entire decade. Bob Kane didn't want a sidekick. Readers made it very clear they disagreed. By 1947, Robin had his own solo feature in Star Spangled Comics starting with issue number 65, and that run lasted around 65 issues through 1952. That's a massive amount of solo story real estate for a character marketed as someone's sidekick. Let that sink in. Kids didn't want to be Batman. They wanted to be Robin. The brooding adult in the cape was cool, sure. But the young acrobat punching criminals? That was the fantasy. And Golden Age Robin wasn't some helpless tag-along. He was solving crimes without Batman even being in the room. Entire stories revolved around Dick Grayson working cases solo, making him closer to a co-lead than a sidekick. Then came the multimedia explosion. Robin crossed into radio serials in 1945, appeared in two film serials, Batman in 1943, and Batman and Robin in 1949, making him one of the earliest superhero properties to exist outside of comics entirely. DC launched dedicated merchandise in 1941, action figures, trading cards, board games, all of it. Robin was a commercial empire before that was even a normal thing for fictional characters. So yeah, the sidekick was outselling, outperforming, and outgrowing the lead, which is exactly why everyone spent the next several decades fighting over what to do with him. But before the fight started, DC had a different problem. By the early 1960s, the whole Batman formula felt stale, and one editor decided to fix everything. The Julius Schwartz revamp. By 1964, Batman was dying, not in the comics, on the sales charts. For the second time in 25 years, the books were bleeding readers, and DC was staring down the very real possibility of cancellation. So they did what any desperate publisher would do. They called in Julius Schwartz. Schwartz was a legendary DC editor, and his mandate was simple: make Batman feel modern or watch him disappear. The result was the New Look era, starting with Detective Comics number 327 in May 1964. Batman got a yellow oval around the bat symbol on his chest. Robin got an updated costume with a sleeker, more contemporary silhouette, and the entire tone of the books shifted overnight. But here's the thing, this wasn't some grand artistic vision, this was a survival move. Schwartz looked across the aisle at Marvel, saw what Spider-Man was doing with teen heroes carrying serious stories, and realized DC was getting embarrassed. Peter Parker proved that young characters didn't have to be comic relief. They could be the emotional core. So Schwartz took Robin and deliberately rebuilt his narrative function. Less gee whiz, Batman! And more actual detective partner. Story weight got split more evenly between the two characters, giving Robin genuine agency for the first time in years. Now, the yellow oval. Fans still argue about whether it was an improvement or a crime against design. It's one of those low-stakes comic debates that will literally never end, and honestly, both sides have a point. What matters is that it worked. The book stabilized, Robin survived, and the modernization couldn't have come at a better time, because something absolutely massive was about to hit television. The 1966 TV show. On January 12, 1966, ABC premiered a little show called Batman, and 45.3% of the entire television audience tuned in. To put that in perspective, that number basically doesn't exist anymore. The Super Bowl barely pulls those kinds of figures, and right there, front and center, was a 20-year-old kid named Burt Ward in bright green tights, screaming, "Holy sardine!" at Adam West's completely straight-faced Batman. The dynamic worked perfectly. Adam West played Batman like a man who didn't realize he was in a comedy. Burt Ward played Robin like a kid who couldn't contain himself for 5 seconds. Every episode, Ward would rattle off another variation of Holy Blank, and the audience ate it up. Holy nightmare. Holy priceless collection of Etruscan snoods. He delivered hundreds of these across 120 episodes and a theatrical film, and every single one became quotable. But here's the thing nobody expected. At the show's peak, Burt Ward was receiving more fan mail than Adam West. The sidekick was outpacing the lead. Again, this exact same pattern happened in the Golden Age comics when Robin outsold Batman in solo features. There's something about this character that just refuses to stay in second place. The show made Robin a global pop culture icon overnight. Kids on every continent knew the costume, the catchphrases, the energy. But that success came with a price. The campy exclamation point version of Robin burned itself into the public consciousness so deeply that comic writers spent the next decade trying to claw their way back to being taken seriously. Robin was more famous than ever, and that fame was slowly becoming a cage. And the only way out was to let Dick Grayson do something no sidekick had ever done before: grow up. Dick Grayson grows up. Here's the thing about the 1966 TV show. It made Robin a household name, but it also made him a punchline. And once that show ended, DC had a problem. Batman's comics were shifting darker, grittier, more serious. A teenage kid in green pixie boots cracking jokes didn't exactly fit the vibe anymore. So throughout the 1970s, Dick Grayson got quietly pushed to the margins. Not killed off, not written out dramatically, just slowly edged out of the main Batman books, panel by panel, year by year. He'd show up occasionally, but the message was clear. Batman was moving on, but Dick Grayson wasn't done. In November 1980, the new Teen Titans #1 hit shelves, written by Marv Wolfman, and it gave Dick something he'd never truly had before: a narrative home that wasn't Batman's shadow. He became the leader of the Titans. And for the first time in 40 years, Robin felt like his own character instead of somebody's sidekick. Then came July 1984, Tales of the Teen Titans #44. Wolfman and artist George Perez did something no DC sidekick had ever done. Dick Grayson officially retired the Robin identity and became Nightwing. The name came from a legendary hero in Kryptonian mythology, a figure Superman himself had once adopted as an alias while adventuring in the bottled city of Kandor, which is genuinely one of the most random origin points for one of DC's most beloved heroes. A Kryptonian legend filtered through Superman lore. Sure, why not? But the important part is what it represents. This transition took roughly 14 years from start to finish. It wasn't a stunt, it was earned, and Nightwing became the first DC sidekick to genuinely graduate into their own hero identity. Before Dick, sidekicks either stayed frozen in their role forever or got replaced. He proved there was a third option. You could grow up. There's something a little bittersweet about it, though. Robin was gone. The original Robin, the kid who'd been swinging alongside Batman since 1940, had finally left the nest. And that meant the mantle was empty, which meant DC needed to fill it. And the way they chose to do that, and what happened next, is one of the most controversial decisions in comic book history. Jason Todd and the phone vote. Let's talk about the Robin that readers literally voted to kill. After Dick Grayson graduated to Nightwing, DC needed a replacement. Enter Jason Todd, introduced in Batman #357 in March 1983. He was a street orphan, picked up by Batman after trying to steal the tires off the Batmobile. On paper, it's a great origin. Scrappy kid from the streets, no circus background, no safety net. A different kind of Robin, but fans hated him. Not mildly disliked, actively despised. Jason was reckless, abrasive, and constantly compared to Dick Grayson in ways he could never win. He didn't have the charm. He didn't have the likability. He had attitude, and readers weren't buying it. So DC did something that had never been done before in mainstream comics. They let the audience decide his fate. In 1988, DC set up two 1-900 phone numbers, one to save Jason Todd, one to kill him, 50 cents per call. The future of a major character decided by whoever felt strongly enough to pick up a phone. The results came in: 5,343 votes to kill him, 5,271 votes to save him, a margin of 72 votes. Let that sit for a second. One of the most famous character deaths in comic book history happened because 72 more people wanted him dead than alive. That's not a mandate. That's a coin flip with phone charges. Jason died in a death in the family, beaten with a crowbar by the Joker, and killed in a warehouse explosion. It was brutal, it was permanent, and it stayed that way for 17 years. He didn't come back until Batman number 635 in February 2005, and when he did, the entire conversation changed. Suddenly, the debate wasn't about whether Jason deserved to die. It was whether killing him had ever meant anything at all. Here's the thing. You can call the vote a marketing gimmick. You can call it reckless. But a death in the family remains one of DC's best-selling storylines to this day. The gimmick worked. But if Jason Todd's death proved that fans could reject a Robin, the next one proves something even more important: that a Robin could earn the role on their own terms. Tim Drake changes everything. Every Robin before Tim Drake got the job the same way. Something terrible happened to them, Batman showed up, and he handed them a cape. Tim Drake looked at that pattern and said no. He'd figure it out himself, and that's exactly what he did. As a kid, Tim watched a news broadcast of Batman and Robin in action, noticed a specific acrobatic move, and traced it back to Dick Grayson's circus performances. From there, he reverse-engineered Batman's identity purely through observation and deduction. No tragedy, no coincidence, just a teenager with a notebook and an obsessive attention to detail. Here's the thing, Tim didn't just figure out who Batman was. He then walked up to Bruce Wayne and made a case for why Batman needed a Robin. Not begged, not stumbled into the role. He literally argued his way into the job. That's unprecedented. Dick Grayson was adopted into it. Jason Todd was scooped off the streets. Tim Drake submitted a resume, and Batman didn't just hand it over. Tim was introduced in Batman number 436 in August 1989, but he didn't officially become Robin until Batman number 457 about a year later. He had to earn it through an extended proving period that no previous Robin went through. That gap matters because it tells you everything about who this character was designed to be. Tim was built from the ground up as the intellectual Robin, not Dick's athleticism, not Jason's recklessness. Pure detective capability. He held the mantle from 1991 to 2004, the longest continuous tenure of any Robin in comics history, 13 years, and much of that run was defined by Chuck Dixon's writing, which cemented Tim's central premise, that you could earn a superhero identity through intellect and persistence rather than trauma. That was genuinely new. It changed how every Robin after him was written. He eventually transitioned to the Red Robin identity in 2009. Echoing Dick Grayson's path toward independence while carving out something distinctly his own. But if Tim Drake proved that Robin could be earned through brilliance, the next person to wear the cape proved just how quickly it could be taken away. Stephanie Brown's tenure. Here's something that doesn't get said enough. Stephanie Brown wasn't some random character. DC pulled off the bench to fill a vacancy. She'd been active in DC Comics since 1992 as Spoiler. 12 years of history, her own rogues, her own story arcs, her own fan base. So when Tim Drake temporarily retired and Stephanie stepped into the role in 2004, it wasn't a publicity stunt. It was a promotion that made sense. She became the fourth Robin and the first woman to ever hold the mantle in DC canon. And then it was over. Her tenure lasted roughly 5 issues before Batman removed her from the role. 5 issues. That's it. The in-story justification? Recklessness. She was too impulsive, too dangerous, too much of a liability. personality. Batman fired her. Now let's talk about that word, recklessness. Because recklessness was Jason Todd's entire personality for 5 years. 5 years of ignoring orders, brutalizing criminals, and escalating every situation he touched. And DC's solution for Jason wasn't termination from the role. It was termination of his life. They let readers vote on whether to kill him, but they never fired him. The reckless boy got 5 years and a dramatic death. The reckless girl got 5 issues and a pink slip. You can draw your own conclusions there, but the comparison is genuinely striking, and DC never publicly articulated a comprehensive editorial reasoning for why Stephanie's tenure was cut so short. That silence left a vacuum, and the fandom filled it with exactly the conversation you'd expect. But here's where the story gets interesting instead of just frustrating. Stephanie Brown moved on. She became Batgirl, and her Batgirl run was substantially longer, more critically acclaimed, and more beloved than her time as Robin ever was. DC leaned into it hard. She got better stories, better arcs, and a fan base that grew fiercer with every issue. She arguably got a better deal after Robin than she ever had during it. Still, the question lingers, and nobody at DC has ever fully answered it. But if Stephanie's tenure raised questions about who gets to wear the mantle, the next Robin raised questions about what the mantle even means when it's worn by Batman's own son, Damian Wayne. Every Robin before Damian Wayne followed the same basic formula. Batman finds a kid, trains them, shapes them into a hero. Damian flipped that entire dynamic on its head, because Damian didn't need Batman to teach him how to fight. He needed Batman to teach him how to stop killing people. Damian Wayne is the biological son of Bruce Wayne and Talia al Ghul, raised from birth by the League of Assassins. He was technically introduced in a 1987 graphic novel that was considered out of continuity, but DC brought him into official canon in Batman number 655 in 2006, written by Grant Morrison. The concept was too good to leave in an alternate universe. Damian officially became Robin when Dick Grayson took over the Batman mantle. He was 10 years old, the youngest Robin in canon, and unlike every Robin before him, Damian wasn't wide-eyed or eager to please. He was arrogant, violent, and genuinely dangerous. This was a child trained since birth to be an assassin. He killed opponents. He openly disagreed with Batman's no-kill rule. He thought Bruce was weak for having morals. Here's where it gets psychologically fascinating. Batman wasn't mentoring a student. He was deprogramming his own son. Bruce wasn't teaching skills. He was teaching restraint. He wasn't building a hero from scratch. He was trying to undo years of conditioning from one of the most dangerous organizations on the planet. Damian forced Bruce to articulate why his moral code mattered rather than just enforcing it. Then DC killed Batman Incorporated number 8, 2013. Damian Wayne, dead at 13. He stayed dead for about a year and a half before being resurrected in the Robin Rises arc. Sound familiar? Because we literally just talked about Jason Todd and the revolving door of comic book death. Grant Morrison's version of Damian is almost universally considered the definitive take. The arrogance balanced with vulnerability, the slow moral evolution, the tension between nature and nurture. That foundation was so strong that Damian has remained a major presence in Batman comics through 2026. But Damian introduced something no other Robin ever did. What does the sidekick role mean when the sidekick is the hero's biological child, trained since birth to be everything the hero stands against? That's not a sidekick story anymore. That's a family story, and it changes everything about what Robin can be, which brings us to where all of this stands right now. Robin today. So where does that leave us? 5 Robins, all alive, all active, none of them sharing a title. Damian Wayne is technically the current Robin in DC's main continuity, but current Robin doesn't mean what it used to. Dick Grayson is thriving as Nightwing, consistently one of DC's most beloved characters with his own long-running series. Jason Todd built an entire fan base around Red Hood that rivals some A-list heroes. Tim Drake came back to major prominence through Detective Comics storylines and his own solo book. Stephanie Brown carved out her own legacy that extends well beyond those 18 months. None of them need the Robin mantle anymore, and that's the point. DC published a Robin solo series starting in 2021 that ran through 2022, and ran Batman: Urban Legends as an anthology featuring all 5 canonical Robins as fully developed, separate characters existing simultaneously. The mantle went from singular to something closer to a franchise, whether that's a rich much narrative achievement or evidence that the concept has been stretched past its original purpose depends entirely on which corner of the internet you're standing in. 5 Robins means 5 passionate fan communities, each absolutely certain their Robin is the definitive one. It's both hilarious and genuinely fascinating to watch. Across media, Robin keeps expanding. 2022's The Batman teased Robin in its epilogue content. Animated series continue featuring different Robins simultaneously. Robin merchandise remains consistently among DC's top commercial performers across every age group. The character sells to kids, to adults, to collectors, to casual fans who couldn't name a single storyline but recognize the red and green. Here's what nobody expected though. Academic and critical analysis of Robin has grown substantially in recent years. Actual essays examining the character through frameworks of masculinity, mentorship, trauma, and adolescence. Not as a footnote to Batman scholarship, as a legitimate literary subject in its own right. Robin, the kid's sidekick, getting the same analytical treatment as the Dark Knight himself. Think about that for a second. The character that Bob Kane didn't want to create in 1940. The one Bill Finger and Jerry Robinson had to argue for. Had to fight to get into Detective Comics 38 because they believed Batman needed a kid beside him. That character became 5 distinct people, a franchise, a cultural touchstone, and an ongoing, never-ending argument about what heroism, loyalty, and growing up actually mean. 86 years later, the argument's still going, and honestly, that might be the most Robin thing about Robin. He was never supposed to stay the same. He was always supposed to grow up. If you enjoyed this video and want to see more, click the video on the screen now.